Welcome back to the Vintage Firearm series. In today's video, we're going to be talking about Winchester's model 1911. This gun became known fairly early on as the Widowmaker, and we're going to be talking about why. And you may have heard about this gun, you may have even watched videos on it. But I think this particular video was going to show some deep things in there that you might not have heard all in one place. First of all, I found this gun in what I will call a bargain bin in a gun store in Indiana. It had a couple of things about it that made me decide to come home with it. First of all, it was cheap. But that's not the main reason I buy a gun. In fact, it's seldom a reason that I buy a gun. This particular gun, of course, was dangerous because of the cocking mechanism, the loading of the first shell, chambering it. But what made this particular one worse was that somebody, perhaps in the late 50s, it was common then, put a compensator on the end and shortened the barrel. You need to shorten the barrel when you do that because the barrel would have been way out to here and it probably was choked heavily. I haven't read on this. Now it's modified, so I don't even know why they cut it that much, but they felt it was necessary. Okay, so they would cut down the barrel and then they could make the choking whatever they wanted using this compensator. It was a very popular thing to do in the late 50s, and even Winchester themselves offered it as a factory option. But in this particular case, on this gun, it made this gun, which some consider quite dangerous, I think that's fair, in the wrong hands. They made it even worse. And we're going to go into that a little bit. But before we really get started with that, we're going to talk about why Winchester thought it was necessary to make this gun, a gun they never wanted to make. And for that, we have to go to another gun. This is John Browning's Auto 5. This is the gun that he came to Winchester with in about 1898. And they kept on playing around. They kept on telling him he had to make minor changes in it, and just stalling, that's all they were doing. And that went on for about 2 years. Why were they doing that? They had a great relationship, or should have, with John Browning. After all, he had given them, well, sold to them, many fantastic designs of guns, too numerous to mention here. But we'll touch on one of them, the first one. And so basically, he was designing this gun. It was self-loading, semi-automatic shotgun. And to be honest, it was a near flawless design for its time. But Winchester didn't want it. Why didn't they want it? Well, it's been said a few reasons. One is John Browning was very proficient in designing guns, and he was designing them at some periods. People were saying a brand new design every 3 months. Well, even Winchester couldn't build that many guns. So they had a dilemma. They either built the guns, A, which they felt they couldn't do because there was just too many of them, and then B, buy the rights to them so nobody else would build them, and then not build them themselves. They did that. And the last one was just let them go on and sell it to somebody else. And this is what happened with this gun. Right after the talks fell through completely with Winchester, he went to Remington, and that was an unfortunate event because the gentleman he was going to see at Remington, he died while John Browning was waiting for him in his office, his outer office, I guess. So then he went to FN, who he had had a relationship with. I believe that they had built handguns and things of that nature of his designs. And so John Browning, one of the reasons Winchester was a bit upset is John Browning didn't like some of the things Winchester was doing. Well, what were they doing that would tick John Browning off? Well, I've already mentioned one of them. They were buying the rights to the guns and shelving them. You have to realize some people do things for money, and then some people do things for other reasons. He was designing these guns that he thought were, really making a statement. And they were just getting shelved. Okay, we'll give you money, now go away. And I don't think he wanted that. And the other thing that he wanted to help stop that was a guarantee that the guns would be built and that he'd be paid a certain amount per every gun sold. Now, in Winchester's defense, they had never done that before. Okay? So that was an issue for them. But the reality is, was it an unfair thing to ask for? I can't imagine that it was. And the reason I would say that it wasn't is because FN offered him that. Yeah, they said, we're in. We like that idea. We'll build your gun. And not only will we give you everything you wanted, but we'll put your name on it. It'll be your name on that gun. It'll be called a Browning. And they did that. And to even make it even more interesting, within a few years, Remington was to recover from that tragedy within their company, and Remington was agreed to also go with that arrangement. Now, that didn't happen until 1911, but I have read some things that actually they were building them earlier. This is a very similar design to the Browning Auto 5, almost exact in many ways. And it misses a couple of features over here in the self-loading department. But that's about it. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same gun. And then, to add insult to injury, Savage was to get on board too. This is a Savage variant. And so this didn't come along until later, but everybody was on board but Winchester. So you had Winchester, supposedly one of the premier, if not the premier, gun manufacturers in the United States, and they didn't have an auto-loading shotgun, which was a big thing, and it was a bad publicity thing for them. So they decided to come out with this. Now, this is kind of interesting. They worked on trying to get around John Moses Browning's patents for almost a decade. And they were having a heck of a time, because no matter what you think of John Browning, whether you think he was the greatest gun designer in the history of the world or not, he was ahead of his time at that point because nobody else could do it. And the mere fact that Winchester took almost a decade to try to come up with something, and I would say try on so many levels. First of all, they really didn't know how to do it. That is, in-house designers just weren't of John Browning's capacities. So what did they do? They sent one of their people to Ogden, Utah to buy an Auto 5. Yes, they did that. And then they took it back to their factory and they tried to reverse engineer a gun. They actually took a gun, an Auto 5, and they put something on the barrel here to see if they could hand cock it by hand and deal with several other things. The recoil was an issue, and they couldn't use exact method that John Browning used, and they came up with something that couldn't be challenged by the patents. So they came out with this gun. But back in those days, let's just talk about 1911. You had paper shells. Paper shells could get moist out in the environment. If it was moist, it would become stuck in the chamber. And to cock it, it's quite, honestly, until you get used to it, it's quite a feat. You have to hold it against your body, and that's the mistake that people would make, okay? So what you have to do is push this button in, go like that. But what if you didn't? You went like this, and it would slam fire, okay? So this was a design flaw in the biggest way, because guns of that period of time actually did slam fire. The most notable was the Model 12 and so many others. And people love that because you could just kind of, you know, do like a riot thing. You know, I don't think anybody ever got hurt by somebody slam firing. That's an exaggeration, because the inaccuracy was so bad. But so that's what the problem that you had here. Now, the number one way people got hurt, and what made it worse when they cut off the end of this gun, is when these paper shells got stuck, or any shell got stuck, or somebody had a hard time, they would cock the gun. I'm not used to this, and I'm not sure which way it slam fires and which way not. See, that's the way, see, that's what would happen, okay? So they would be trying to free it up, and they'd have their head too close, and there you go. It's a widowmaker. Ah! Kind of extreme on the thing there. But was this a good gun? In many ways, it was an excellent gun. The way this gun broke down was phenomenal. You hold this little button down here, and you turn this, and you come apart like that. It's probably one of the best designs that I've run across. And I've got a lot of guns that break down. Now, my recommendation is, if you ever get one of these, this is where you stop. You can clean it all out pretty good there. Almost everything is available. Don't go any farther than this, because you will have a nightmare. Okay, so where you put this back is you just set it in like that, and you're all good to go. You hold this little button down, spin it up. Actually, it's one of the nicest breakdowns I have personally been aware of. Okay, and so basically what would happen is that people would, I'm going to leave this in the wrong position because it's so easy. I mean, this is the difference. That'll get you killed. If you were to be stupid and try to cock the gun like this. Because what's going to happen is this gun's going to slam fire. Now that this is even shorter, I'm sitting down and already it's too short. Can you imagine if I was standing up? So you go like this. Okay, it's now ready to go, and it just fired. So just that simple. You go like this. You break it free, and they go, bam, it'll go off. And you could easily get hurt. Not only that, people found them so hard to chamber the first round that even if they did it like this, they'd be fighting with it, and they might shoot somebody else by going, dog, anybody. So was this a good gun? No, it was not a good gun, but it was well made in many ways. They took 10 years almost to design it. So let's go take it outside and fire a couple shots with it, and we'll go from there. Like I say, this is a gun that isn't dangerous if you're extremely cautious with it, and you know its limitations. When you load it up, that's what you do. You put a shell in there. It's loaded. Of course, before you do that, you make sure it's on safe, as it already is. I knew that. And then you load up the rest of them. So let's take it outside. Let's go ahead and see what our Widowmaker will do today. Okay, so for today's event, we'll be using two very fresh, almost new cans, and setting down those rocks down there, trying to save my lawn a little bit, and we'll let the festivities begin. Start the process. So that's how you caulk it. A little cautious. Actually, it loads very easily. And take off the safety. I don't know what this thing is set for. Looks like it might be extra full. A little nervous about this thing. Did it not load the second? Does not seem to. I've seen this happen before on these guys. And that's a good shell. I don't know why it didn't want to fire. That's one of the things that this gun is known for. I don't know what I'm going to do with that shell. Okay, so okay, so it might have something to do with which position this little lever is in. So I might go get a couple more and I don't know. Let's go see. Okay. Oh, hang on a second. Okay. Same thing this time, so. Well, I found out why it grabbed the first one. That's because I didn't lock it open. We'll get the other can. Well, let's go back inside and we'll recap and see what we figured out and what we have no idea about. Okay, let's head back inside. Okay, so what did I think about this after firing it? I think I'd put one shot through it before. I'm a little confused by why it wouldn't cycle. It would chamber the second shot, but it wouldn't fire it. And then you have to remember that this button is pushed in the right position so the shell doesn't get caught halfway as it tries to eject, but gets caught sideways. I saw that happening to somebody else on the internet as well. So what do I think about Winchester's biggest PR disaster? And more than that, it has to go up there with one of the worst guns ever made by Winchester. Not necessarily in quality, but in reality. It's a dangerous gun in the wrong hands. That's beyond any question. This is only the second time I had used it, and the other time I think I just fired one shot through it. That's why I didn't even know that I'm doing something wrong or there's something wrong with the gun. I actually will be getting another one, ironically, that I know a great deal of history on. I believe from day one. I may be even getting a letter from on it because I think it has some kind of special significance, which it'll be taking quite a while to go ahead and do it all, but because I know a great deal about the man who owned it. And so, but in any case, this gun here, what do I think of it? I think that Winchester really, really, really goofed up. It's your legacy at the end. And this will be always a footnote to how much Winchester needed John Moses Browning. John Moses Browning didn't really need Winchester at that point, but they needed him desperately. It took 10 years for them almost to come out with this gun and then to have so many flaws. And then they spent a few years after that trying to take out some of their flaws. They only made this gun from 1911 to 1925, and they didn't sell very many of them, about 80,000 of them. And it took 3 years after they discontinued it to get rid of the stock. That's just to give you an idea of how big a disaster it was. They should have just accepted it. A few years earlier, when Winchester had a problem with the Model 93, and it was only made for black powder, and they recognized that to be dangerous. In 1897, they came out with John Browning's updated design, and in fact, it was a gun that not only was safe, but it had an exposed hammer and it would hit you when you cocked it and things like that. But people loved that, and they kept it around forever. And what did Winchester do about the 93? If you brought in their 93, they'd give you a 97. So in just a few years, Winchester changed so radically in their philosophies that it was the beginning of the end for Winchester. The greatest designs were then behind them. I'm going to get flack on that one. But the greatest designs were then behind them in the future. Somebody will say, well, how about the Model 12? Well, the Model 12, I think, was based primarily on a lot of thoughts of John Browning. Not built by John Browning, not designed technically, but they were using his ideas that they had acquired from the 97. That's just a thought from looking at the guns, and I own both of them, and that's what I think. But in any case, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I certainly have. I'm really looking forward to the other one I do, because this gun here got a pretty low serial number. And it says an A right on top, so that means it's right in there with the first batch, so to speak. But the other one that I have coming is going to be radically earlier than this by about a year. The next one that I'll have coming up, which will be months away because of the research that I need to do on this gentleman who owned it. I'm actually going to go to his hometown. I'm actually going to go to where he's buried. And if I can, those are my goals, and I believe they'll all be easily done. I actually know where he lived, which church he went to. He worked for the railroad. Pretty cool dude. He was in management at the railroad. And so, and he bought it brand new in, I believe, in probably very early 2012. And 1912. And when you consider that the gun was released sometime in October, he probably ordered it right then, and that took him that long to get it. Hey, until tomorrow, I hope you'll come back and see me. And I've had a fun time today, a little nerve-wracking with this. Would I let a friend shoot this gun? Well, that depends. I've given that some thought. And if the guy's a novice, a lot of times a novice will come over and I'll watch over him a little bit, and I'll let him shoot a little bit and have a few shots and give him something nice and easy to shoot that won't, spook him or anything. I would only let the most experienced person who has been around guns their whole life use this gun. And the reason for that is I consider it under the wrong hands to be extremely dangerous, especially with the shortened barrel. And then if I explain to them the details about what to be concerned with, the slam fire, the cocking, pointing it in the right direction as you're cocking it, it gets very, very, very challenging. So in any case, until tomorrow, I thank you for coming along. I hope to see you again. Take it easy. Bye-bye.